is why nobody likes to go after Willie Nelson. You know, it's like, it's a tough act to follow. But thank you. Again, thanks to the organizers. I'm really excited to be here to meet a lot of the people from whom I've learned a lot over the years. And also, you know, to normal people, they don't understand why maybe you and definitely me have this thing about the Scopes trial. It's like model train enthusiasts for a trial. And so any chance to talk about it, I'm really happy to. And what I'd like to talk to you about is a really central question, I think, not just for understanding the very different world in 1925, but also to understanding why Scopes trial was not just something that we want to understand 1925. It's the inaugural skirmish in this continuing thing that we're still doing. So I'd like to talk to you about what I think fundamentalism meant at the time, and I hope to, again, illuminate what the Scopes trial meant, but also what the Scopes trial still means. So the first warning, fundamentalism in the 20s was a mess. It had a lot of different meanings. And it's really tempting, and when I started studying this stuff back in the 20th century, I was tempted, like a lot of people I think are tempted, to try to clear away the mess, you know, to get rid of all the stuff so you can see what it really means. But that's a mistake. Fundamentalism in the 20s, it is the mess. If we want to understand it, we have to understand all the things it meant, sometimes contradictory. And that's not unusual. Any complicated identity is this way. So for example, 2025, what's conservative? You know, is it conservative to support a big, beautiful bill act? If you ask 100 people, you get 100 different answers. And that's not because there's no such thing as conservatism or that you know, it's impossible to understand. Fundamentalism is the same way. It is complicated. We don't have to just say, well, we can't understand it. Instead, what I'm going to try to do this morning is introduce you to 3 people from the 20s who I hope to sort of, you know, triangulate for us a meaning. What all did it mean at the time, and why were those meanings so important? But short answer, fundamentalism in the 20s, it's a lot of things. One of the things is that it was a specific religious movement. Like it meant a specific thing about what it meant to be Christian. For sure. But it's also, and we miss a lot if we stop with one of our definitions, it's also a super broad and very amorphous social movement. You know, generally the conservative side in the culture wars we're still in the middle of in the United States. So same way, when fundamentalists attacked and worried about evolution, yes, they were talking about evolutionary theory, but if we just talk about evolutionary theory, we don't understand. It's evolution in quotes as a symbol of a changing culture that fundamentalists were trying to fight against. Also important, I don't think we understand fundamentalism in the 20s if we don't understand that we're only actually interested in some of these conservatives at the time. And this is one I learned from Glenn many years ago. Lots of people can have conservative beliefs and fundamentalist ideas. That's not what we care about. We care about people who take these beliefs and push them into public and say, not just do I believe this, and this is a really strong element of fundamentalism in the 20s and why the Scopes trial matters so much, in my opinion. Oops, sorry. Fundamentalists at its core in the 20s means having a set of conservative ideas, but also, crucially, thinking that you have the right and the duty to act as the conscience of America, or the world, but we're talking about America. You have, not that you're going to win every time, but that if things were fair, you would be listened to. Jiminy Cricket, you deserve the ability to decide what's right for everyone, especially including places like the public schools. If we miss that, Scopes loses a lot of its meaning. Because Scopes, the trial, sorry, not the person, but wow, what a talk, huh? The trial is one of the early times when fundamentalists people like William Jennings Bryan take this idea of their right to decide for everybody, and not that they lose. As we've heard this morning, it's complicated who wins and loses. But there's no mistaking the fact that they were made fun of in public. And if you think of yourself as the conscience of America, America's preacher, you might not win every fight, but it's really hard to take being made fun of. Okay, so let's meet our people. William Bell Riley, I knew we were going to hear a lot about William Jennings Bryan, so I left him out of this one. But William Bell Riley, if you want to ask someone in the 20s, who's the biggest fundamentalist? William Bell Riley would be a top contender for the job. He would tell you he was the leader. He would tell you he had the right to define fundamentalism. And he spent a lot of time in the 20s trying to prove that anybody else was not a fundamentalist. It was only him. It was only his real religious movement that counted as the real fundamentalism. And he was a minister not in Tennessee. He was up in Minneapolis. And he founded a group called the World's Christian Fundamentalist Association. He was in constant contact with William Jennings Bryan and many other conservative Protestants. So what did fundamentalism mean for Riley? In short, it's a movement to establish real religion, by which he meant real Christianity, by which he meant real Protestant Christianity. So for people like William Bell Riley, the questions, this is a great cartoon that I found in the Moody Bible Institute Monthly from Chicago. This is what they thought of as the real fundamentalism. Yeah, it's evolution. Humans were created, not evolved. But the biggest thing, the 100% top billing, is the nature of the Bible. For this kind of fundamentalist, William Bell Riley type, the Bible is the Word of God. It's not a collection of thoughts about God. It's not just the story of Jesus' life. It's the actual Word of God delivered to our species to guide us. It's inerrant, as the folks at the Princeton Seminary were writing at the time. Meaning, it's not just doesn't have any errors, it can't have error. It's God speaking to our species. Riley was worried about liberal Protestants who were saying, and had been saying for 50 years, the Bible's good, but it's good, it was made by humans. Riley says, no, fundamentalism, real Christianity means that the Bible is the Word of God. We have to start with that. And evolution matters a lot. Riley is super involved in evolution because he sees it this way. It's a Pied Piper. The Pied Piper is tootling his Darwinian hypothesis of evolution, and all the little children are running, following down the path of education into this, which is what people like William Bell Riley were worried about. Evolution is a danger, not for itself, but for this. Atheism, a doubting of faith, is what fundamentalists like William Bell Riley were worried about. They thought evolution would get the children there. So we don't understand fundamentalism in the 20s if we don't understand William Bell Riley's type of it. A theological movement that pushes itself into public by making laws about what schools should do and what society should do. But if we stop with Riley, we don't get it, I think. We got to know people like Thomas L. Blanton, not a household name today, but he should be. Thomas L. Blanton is shown here in the U.S. Congress yelling at his colleagues, which is what he did. He's a Republican. He's a congressman from Texas, Democrat, my bad. I got confused, 1925, 2025. I'm sorry. Blanton considered himself a fundamentalist. Yes, he was Baptist. Yes, he was, a conservative Christian. But his thing wasn't his conservative Christianity. Fundamentalism for him meant a different part. So, for example, on the halls, on the floor of Congress, he said, "Hey, people make fun of us. The newspapers make fun of us, and they call us fundamentalists whenever we want to inquire what the children are being taught. This is also fundamentalism in the 1920s. It's a certain type of grievance about things like the press and about the way people like Blanton, who expected to be listened to, were treated by, he didn't say the word fake news, but this is why I think the Scopes era matters so much and why fundamentalism matters so much. This style of aggrieved, a feeling of being usurped, kicked out of your proper role as the decider, is a driving part of fundamentalism in the era. Blanton was also infamous for the way he delivered. He was censured twice by Congress. Once for an expletive-laden speech in Congress about one of his colleagues. Second time for threatening to fist fight with another colleague in Congress. So it's funny in 2025, but it's also not. This style of believing you have the right to be the real America and feeling like your aggression is a virtue, your breaking of norms is a virtue in fighting for what's right, this is the Scopes era. Briefly, I'd like to mention, even though it takes us a little into the future, 1935, Thomas Blanton made his biggest push. And it's about fundamentalism, but it's not directly about evolution. Thomas Blanton inserts into the budget what was called the Little Red Rider. It's really an extraordinary piece of legislation. Congress at the time controlled D.C. schools directly. And it banned teachers in D.C. schools, public schools, from mentioning communism. They couldn't mention it in class. But get this, they couldn't mention it outside of class. They weren't allowed to talk about it in their lives. Every 2 weeks they had to report, pick up their paycheck, and renew their oath that they had done nothing subversive. So you may say, and we're at evolutionary studies, and I get it, this is not about evolution. It's not directly, but I think it is once we understand what evolution meant in the era. Everything that was seen as modern and modernizing and dangerous and threatening to faith, including communism, including women smoking, as we saw with Ed's great talk, including a certain type of dance move. All of these things are bundled together. The Little Red Rider was impossible, obviously. And teachers said, we can't teach your children anything if we can't talk about communism. So it was repealed. Here's how Blanton talked about it in the press. We stopped communism from being taught in Washington schools. They didn't. It wasn't being taught. We stopped it for the protection of Washington's 92,000 children. There is going to be no subversive, insidious propaganda in our schools to Sovietize the school children of the nation's capital. Well, it's true, but not because of the law. The teachers were not communists. They weren't spreading communist propaganda. I can't help but include what the reporter mentioned. Certain shrewd but unscrupulous pupils are attempting to blackmail teachers into giving them undeserved grades by threatening to report them as advocates of communism. So it's not just ChatGPT. The students are always going to read what's going on and use it to their advantage. So the Little Red Rider didn't do anything, but it did mean a lot. It showed, in my opinion, the way fundamentalists like Blanton, who wasn't a fundamentalist like Riley, the way they thought about their role and the way they thought about their goal. Policy could be impossible, but still a great idea for people like Thomas Blanton, if it generates publicity and makes a statement about what you are trying to do. All right, last but not least is a non-fundamentalist. Joseph Villiers-Denny, again, probably someone not a big name in Scopes' legend. He's a literature professor, mostly at Ohio State. He's interesting because to us, in 1924, he's the head of the pretty new American Association of University Professors. It only was founded in 1915. And Denny uses his 1924 presidential address to warn America about the higher ed dangers of fundamentalism. And at the time, it wasn't just Denny. So this is Education in the Higher Branches was a cartoon, ran in a lot of papers. I got it from the Wall Street Journal. You have this cartoonish caricature of a state legislature is how he's labeled, saying sick 'em to his like hunting dogs who are anti this law, anti that law. And notice, it's not just anti-evolution, it's anti-stuff. It's control of higher ed. They're chasing the professor up into the tree. And this, I think, is a savvy depiction of what fundamentalism meant in higher ed. It's watch out for all that stuff they're going to try, evolution being a key part of it, but certainly not the only part. So Denny, seeing this world of fundamentalist attacks on higher ed, he used his podium, his presidency of the of the AAUP, to say this. This is how he defined fundamentalism. He called it an un-American spirit of intolerance and fanaticism. And then I think Professor Denny nails it. He says, it's an effort that is undoubtedly religious in original impulse. He's thinking of people like William Bell Riley. It's religious in original impulse, but that inevitably becomes political in method and affiliations. So Denny's trying to understand fundamentalism. He sees the religious part, and he understands that, but he knows he can't stop there because it's a broad attack on education broadly, K to 12, like the Scopes trial, but also higher ed. So it's true that fundamentalists in the era were keenly interested in higher ed. There's this, from 1921, there's this fake or apocryphal letter, there's no real source, of a son writing home, a college student's son. And it runs in all the fundamentalist newsletters. I got it from a Texas newsletter, Searchlight. It's from a mother's son, and here's what he says to his mom. My soul is a starving skeleton. My heart, a petrified rock. My mind is poisoned and fickle as the wind, and my faith is as unstable as water. I wish that I had never seen a college, bam, bam, bam. This idea among fundamentalism that college was intentionally transforming children, yes, away from their Christianity, but also just ruining their lives, indoctrinating them with this broad spectrum of ideas that were dangerous to them, was a very driving part of fundamentalism in the 20s. And higher ed is one of William Jennings Bryan's first efforts to ban evolution. He fights with my alma mater, Wisconsin, in 1921. And it shows, I think, before the Scopes trial, William Jennings Bryan, thinks it's going to be like a quick fight. He's a master politician. He thinks when he picks a fight with the University of Wisconsin, he's going to win his fight. Because this is what he says. If you want to teach evolution and science, this is what you have to put up. Our classrooms furnish an arena in which a brutish doctrine tears to pieces the religious faith of young men and young women. Parents of the children are cordially invited to watch the spectacle. Bryan thought this was going to be the end, but he was wrong. He lost. The Sunday school teaching evangelical president of Wisconsin at the time dismissed Bryan. He said, we're not going to do any changes. Let's look at North Carolina as well. North Carolina, the university system of North Carolina was attacked by local fundamentalists on a lot of issues. One of them was fundamentalists in North Carolina wanted a professor fired in 1925. His name was Albert Keister. Albert Keister had a spy in his class at the University of North Carolina. A student, it was all women in this class. She wrote notes about what he said, and she reported him to a fundamentalist group in North Carolina. And Keister didn't dispute what he had said. The spy reported him as calling the Bible, quote, a form of mythology. And for that, Keister was going to get fired. But that wasn't the only thing Keister was accused of, and I think it's really central to our understanding of fundamentalists at the time, what else they said. When they wrote to have him fired, the fundamentalist group, which was signed by a petition signed by a lot of people in North Carolina to get him fired, they said he taught, these are their words, not his, they said he taught, quote, infidel ideas about white supremacy. We don't know exactly what they meant. But for fundamentalists in the 20s, teaching women, there's a class of women, that the Bible is a myth, that's anti-fundamentalist, you deserve to be fired. But apparently, teaching them also that white supremacy was dangerous, not true, that was also considered a part of this religious danger. Infidel ideas about white supremacy is what he was accused of teaching. He kept his job, but only because his boss, Harry Chase, who was at Chapel Hill, the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, he defended not just Keister, but all of the university system in a way that the president of Wisconsin did fighting against William Jennings Bryan. He said, Harry Chase said, the president of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, said, we're not going to fire Keister because we can't be a, quote, real university if we're going to behave that way. Right? Harry Chase also said, cut my funding if you want. That's not the main thing. 1925. So the takeaway isn't just that the world of higher ed had fewer NIH grants at the time and so could say things like that. The takeaway is that fundamentalism was a lot of things at once. Yes, religion, absolutely, but an idea that you get to say, if you're a fundamentalist, what's right for everyone in schools and generally in culture. So back to the Pied Piper. What was fundamentalism? They're not anti-science. The Pied Piper here is labeled science falsely so-called. They're against false science in their definition. They're against what they consider a false definition of science, dangerously harming children. They're certainly not anti-technology. Fundamentalists are pioneering the use of radio, newsletters. They're technophiles. They are against evolution. And I think we need to understand it. They saw evolution as a broad-ranging trend, including women with short hair. Seriously, including certain types of dancing, including questioning white supremacy. One of the reasons that this 100 years has been so confusing is that you have mainstream scientists saying, here's evolutionary theory, and then fundamentalists saying, I love my child. And it's like, great, but they're two very different conversations that have gone past each other the whole time. Certainly, fundamentalists in the Scopes era were against academic freedom as we understand it. They just didn't see that as a value. Bryan thought that by pointing this out, the university would have to change. North Carolina fundamentalists thought that by telling people what this professor had said, he would just be fired. And I think the biggest of all is that fundamentalists in the 20s were against inclusion, not in the sense that we might mean it today, but rather they were against broadening the number and type of people who got to decide what went on in schools and culture. In their opinion, it should be them, always them. And the idea of broadening that group of people, they just saw as not just a bad idea, but an impossible idea. So with my eye on the time, I'll stop, but I thank you, and I really appreciate the chance to be here.